everyone, to another episode of our Daily English Conversations podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that I think we can all relate to: small actions, big impact. You know, those little things we do every day that might seem insignificant but actually add up to something much bigger. Isn't that right, Mason?
Absolutely, Sophia. Sometimes, we underestimate the power of small actions, but they can really make a difference whether it's in our personal lives, communities, or even on a global scale. And I think that's something we all need to be reminded of from time to time.
Exactly. I think a lot of our listeners might be wondering, what kind of small actions are we talking about? And that's a great question. Small actions could be as simple as smiling at a stranger, conserving water, or even something like recycling. These actions may seem small on their own, but when you put them together, when everyone starts doing them, they can have a huge impact.
Right. It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Every small step we take contributes to the bigger picture. And today, we're going to explore how these small actions can lead to big changes. We'll look at different examples, talk about our own experiences, and maybe even share a few stories from our listeners.
That's right, Mason. And for those of you listening, we want you to think about the small actions you take in your daily life. It could be anything, really, like choosing to walk instead of drive, or taking the time to help someone in need. Think about how those actions might be impacting the people around you, or even the world at large.
Exactly, Sophia. You know, one of the key things I've realized is that it's not just about what we do, but also about how consistent we are with those actions. Even if it's something small, if we do it consistently, it starts to create a ripple effect. And that's where the real impact happens.
Yes, the ripple effect. That's a powerful concept. It's like when you throw a pebble into a pond, the ripples spread out far beyond where the pebble actually landed. The same thing happens with our actions. When we do something positive, even if it's small, it can inspire others to do the same. And before you know it, those small actions are having a big impact. Before we go deeper, let's take a moment to go over some important phrases and words that we'll be using today. We'll make sure to repeat these throughout our conversation so that everyone can understand and use them in their own lives.
Good idea, Sophia. So, the first phrase we mentioned was small actions, big impact. This means that even small, everyday actions can lead to significant changes or effects.
And then we talked about the ripple effect. This is when one action causes a series of other actions or effects, much like how ripples spread out when you drop a pebble in water.
We also mentioned the phrase consistency. This means doing something regularly, without stopping. When we're consistent with our actions, even small ones, they start to build up over time, leading to bigger results.
Don't worry if you don't catch everything the first time. We'll be repeating these phrases and words throughout our discussion to make sure they really stick with you.
You know, Sophia, I think a great example of small actions, big impact, is in the way we treat the environment. Something as simple as turning off the lights when you leave a room, or bringing your own reusable bag to the grocery store, can make a huge difference over time.
Absolutely, Mason. And it's not just about what we do as individuals, it's also about encouraging others to do the same. That's where the ripple effect comes in. When we model these small, positive behaviors, we inspire others to do the same. And when enough people get on board, that's when we start to see real change.
Exactly. And let's not forget that these actions don't always have to be about the environment. They can be about how we interact with others too. For example, showing kindness to someone who's having a bad day can have a big impact on their mood, and they might pass that kindness on to someone else.
Yes, it's all connected. And that's why it's so important to be mindful of our actions, no matter how small they might seem. Because you never know who's watching or how your actions might influence others.
So, to sum up what we've talked about so far, the main idea is that even small actions can have a big impact, especially when they're done consistently. Whether it's something as simple as conserving water, being kind to others, or recycling, These actions can lead to bigger changes over time.
Now, we've been talking about how small actions can lead to big impacts. We introduced the concept and discussed how even the tiniest steps can create a ripple effect, leading to significant changes.
That's right, Sophia. And in this part, we're going to dig a little deeper. We'll talk about specific examples, share some personal stories, and explain how you can apply this idea in your daily life. So, let's get started with the story that I think really captures this idea.
Mason, you mentioned earlier that you had a story about a small action that led to something much bigger. Could you share that with us?
Of course, Sophia. This is actually a story from a few years ago. I was volunteering at a local community garden. It was just a small plot of land, and we were growing vegetables to donate to the local food bank. One day, I noticed a young girl, probably around 10 years old, who was watching us from the edge of the garden. She seemed really interested, so I invited her to help us out.
That's wonderful. Mason, what happened next?
Well, she started coming by every day after school. She would help us water the plants, pull weeds, and even plant seeds. At first, it was just a fun activity for her, but over time, she really started to care about the garden and the impact it was having. She even convinced her parents to start a small garden at home.
Wow, that's amazing! So, a small action inviting her to help in the garden led to her developing a passion for gardening. And it didn't stop there, right?
Exactly. A year later, her school started a gardening club, and she became the president of the club. They began growing vegetables at school, and the project expanded to include other schools in the area. It all started with one small action inviting her to join us in the garden.
That's such a powerful example. Mason, it shows how one small, seemingly insignificant action can lead to a much bigger impact, not just for one person, but for an entire community. And that's exactly what we mean by small actions, big impact. Let's take a moment to go over some of the key phrases and words we've used so far. These are really important to understand the conversation fully.
Yes, let's do that. The first phrase I'd like to focus on is ripple effect. As we mentioned earlier, this means that one action causes a series of other actions or effects, much like how ripples spread out in water when you drop a pebble. In the story I shared, inviting the young girl to the garden was the pebble, and the ripple effect was the creation of the school gardening club and the impact it had on the community.
Another important phrase is community garden. A community garden is a shared space where people come together to grow plants, usually vegetables or flowers. The garden in Mason's story wasn't just a place to grow food. It became a place where people connected and made a difference in their community.
And let's not forget the word volunteering. Volunteering means offering your time and skills to help others without getting paid. It's a small action that can have a huge impact, as we saw in the story.
Exactly. Don't worry if these phrases are new to you. We'll be using them throughout the rest of our conversation, and we'll keep repeating them so you can really get comfortable with them.
You know, Sophia, this story really got me thinking. How many times do we miss opportunities to create a positive impact because we think our actions are too small to matter?
That's a great point, Mason. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's often the small, consistent actions that add up over time. For example, something as simple as saying thank you or offering a smile can brighten someone's day. It might seem insignificant, but it can really make a difference, especially if you do it consistently.
Definitely. And it's not just about making a difference for others, it's also about how these actions impact us personally. When we make a habit of doing small, positive things, it can change our mindset and make us more aware of the opportunities we have to make a difference.
Yes, it's like building a habit. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. And before you know it, those small actions are just a natural part of your daily routine. And they start to have a bigger impact because you're doing them consistently.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that we don't have to wait for big opportunities to make a difference. Sometimes, the small things we do every day are what matter most. Whether it's helping a neighbor, recycling, or even just listening to someone who needs to talk, it all adds up. You know, Sophia, this story really got me thinking. How many times do we miss opportunities to create a positive impact because we think our actions are too small to matter?
That's a great point, Mason. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's often the small, consistent actions that add up over time. For example, something as simple as saying thank you or offering a smile can brighten someone's day. It might seem insignificant, but it can really make a difference, especially if you do it consistently.
Definitely. And it's not just about making a difference for others, it's also about how these actions impact us personally. When we make a habit of doing small, positive things, it can change our mindset and make us more aware of the opportunities we have to make a difference.
Yes, it's like building a habit. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. And before you know it, those small actions are just a natural part of your daily routine. And they start to have a bigger impact because you're doing them consistently.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that we don't have to wait for big opportunities to make a difference. Sometimes, the small things we do every day are what matter most. Whether it's helping a neighbor, recycling, or even just listening to someone who needs to talk, it all adds up.
You know, Mason, your story reminded me of something similar that happened in my neighborhood. There's an elderly woman who lives down the street from me. She's lived there for years, but she doesn't have any family nearby, so she's often alone. One day, I noticed that her garden was looking a little overgrown, so I offered to help her tidy it up.
That's really kind of you, Sophia. What happened next?
Well, it started out as just a one-time thing, but I enjoyed spending time with her, and I could tell she appreciated the company. So I started visiting her every weekend to help with her garden. Over time, some of the other neighbors noticed and started stopping by to say hello or bring her some baked goods. What started as a small gesture turned into a whole neighborhood effort to look out for her and make sure she felt supported.
That's such a heartwarming story, Sophia. It shows how one small action, just offering to help with her garden, can lead to a stronger sense of community. And I'm sure it made a big difference in her life, knowing that people cared about her.
It really did, Mason. And it's a reminder that sometimes the simplest things can have the biggest impact. We don't always have to do something grand or extraordinary to make a difference. Sometimes, just being there for someone is enough. Let's go over some of the key phrases and words we've used in this part of the podcast, so everyone can really understand and remember them.
Good idea. The first phrase we want to repeat is small, consistent actions. This means doing small things regularly, which over time can lead to significant results. In both of our stories, small, consistent actions like helping in the garden or visiting a neighbor created a big impact.
Another important word is community. This refers to a group of people who live in the same area or share common interests. In both stories, the community played a key role in supporting and helping others.
And don't forget volunteering and habit. Volunteering is when you give your time to help others, and a habit is something you do regularly without even thinking about it. Building positive habits, like volunteering or helping others, can have a big impact over time.
We'll keep using these words and phrases throughout the rest of our conversation, so you can get really comfortable with them. Remember, the more you hear and use these words, the easier they'll become to understand and remember.
So, Sophia, what do you think is the easiest way for someone to start making small actions that lead to big impacts?
I think the best way is to start with something you care about. It could be helping a neighbor, like in my story, or volunteering for a cause you're passionate about. The key is to start small and be consistent. Even if it's just one small action a day, it can add up over time.
That's great advice. And I would add that it's important to stay open to opportunities. Sometimes, the chance to make a difference might come from something unexpected, like noticing someone who needs help or seeing a way to improve something in your community.
Absolutely. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. In both of our stories, the small actions led to a wider community effort. So don't be afraid to get others involved. Together, we can create an even bigger impact.
Well said, Sophia. So, to everyone listening, we encourage you to think about the small actions you can take today, whether it's helping someone, being kind, or just being more aware of how your actions affect others. Every little bit counts.
Now, we discussed how even the smallest actions can lead to significant changes. We shared stories and explored how these actions can create a ripple effect.
That's right, Sophia. In this final part, we're going to focus on how you can incorporate the idea of small actions into your daily life. We'll discuss practical tips, share more inspiring stories, and answer some common questions about making a difference through everyday actions.
Let's start with some practical tips. Mason, what are some small actions that people can take every day to make a positive impact?
Great question, Sophia. One simple action is to practice kindness. This could be as easy as complimenting someone, helping a colleague with a task, or even just holding the door open for someone. Small acts of kindness can really brighten someone's day and create a positive atmosphere.
Absolutely. Another tip is to be environmentally conscious. Simple actions like recycling, reducing plastic use, or conserving water can have a big impact on the environment. For example, choosing reusable bags instead of plastic ones helps reduce waste and protect our planet.
Yes, and don't forget about being mindful in our daily interactions. Listening actively when someone is speaking and showing empathy can make a huge difference in relationships. It's these small, thoughtful actions that build stronger connections with others.
Definitely. And remember, these actions don't have to be grand or time-consuming. The key is to make them a regular part of your routine. Over time, these small actions will accumulate and lead to significant positive changes.
I'd love to share another story that really illustrates the power of small actions. A few years ago, there was a community in a small town that wanted to make a difference in their local park. The park had become quite run down, and the community felt it was time for a change.
That sounds interesting. Mason, what did they do?
Instead of waiting for a big organization to step in, the community decided to take small steps themselves. They organized weekend cleanups where volunteers picked up trash, painted benches, and planted flowers. Each person only contributed a few hours of their time, but the collective effort transformed the park into a beautiful, welcoming space.
That's amazing. It's incredible how a group of people coming together to take small actions can lead to such a big impact. And I bet the park has become a much-loved spot in the community.
Exactly. And it's a perfect example of how small, consistent efforts can lead to a major transformation. The park is now a place where families gather, kids play, and everyone enjoys the outdoors. It all started with a few people deciding to take small steps to make a difference.
Let's take a moment to review some of the key phrases and words from this part of the podcast. Understanding these terms will help you grasp the main ideas more effectively.
Sure thing. The first phrase we used is practical tips. This means advice or suggestions that are useful and can be easily implemented in daily life. For example, recycling and practicing kindness are practical tips for making a positive impact.
Another important phrase is environmentally conscious. This refers to being aware of and taking actions that help protect the environment. Simple actions like reducing plastic use or conserving water are ways to be environmentally conscious.
We also talked about active listening. This means giving your full attention to someone who is speaking, showing that you are engaged and interested. It's a small action that can significantly improve communication and relationships.
And remember, consistent efforts are actions that are done regularly over time. Even small actions, when done consistently, can lead to big changes.
Sophia, what's one small action you've taken recently that made a difference?
Well, just last week, I decided to bake some cookies and deliver them to my neighbors. It was a small gesture, but they were really happy to receive them. It started conversations and helped build a stronger sense of community.
That's a wonderful example, Sophia. Sometimes, small actions like that can create unexpected connections and strengthen relationships within a community.
Absolutely, and it's important to remember that these actions don't have to be perfect or elaborate. It's the thought and effort behind them that count.
Exactly. So, for our listeners, think about one small action you can take today that could make a positive difference. It could be something as simple as sending a thank you note or helping someone with a small task.
Mason, do you think there are any challenges people might face when trying to make small changes? And how can they overcome them?
Great question. One challenge people might face is feeling like their actions are too small to matter. It's important to remember that every small action contributes to a larger impact. If you start with small, manageable steps, you can gradually build confidence and see the difference you're making.
That's true. And another challenge could be finding the time or motivation to take these small actions. Setting small, achievable goals and making them a part of your routine can help overcome this. It's about making these actions a natural part of your life.
Yes, and it's also helpful to remind yourself of the positive impact you're making. Reflecting on the benefits of your actions can keep you motivated and focused.
Exactly. And remember, even if it feels like a small contribution, it's still valuable. Every little bit helps, and together, these small actions can lead to significant change. Now, in this last segment, we're going to reflect on our conversation, summarize key points, and discuss how you can continue to make a difference.
That's right, Sophia. We'll also talk about how to maintain motivation and keep making those small changes in your life. Let's start by revisiting some of the key phrases and concepts we've discussed.
First, let's summarize the main ideas from our conversation. We've learned that even small actions can have a significant impact. Whether it's a simple act of kindness, environmental conservation, or improving communication, these actions contribute to a larger positive change.
Absolutely. Remember the phrase, small actions, big impact. It means that even small, seemingly insignificant actions can lead to significant outcomes over time. It's all about consistency and the intention behind the actions.
Another important concept is consistency. This means doing something regularly. For example, if you consistently recycle, use less plastic, or help others, these small actions accumulate and lead to a bigger positive effect.
We also talked about environmentally conscious and active listening. Being environmentally conscious involves taking actions to protect the environment, like reducing waste. Active listening means fully focusing on the speaker and engaging with what they're saying.
Now, let's discuss how to stay motivated when making small changes. Mason, what are some strategies to keep yourself motivated?
One effective strategy is to set small, achievable goals. For example, if you want to reduce plastic use, start by using reusable bags for grocery shopping. Once you've established this habit, you can gradually take on more challenges.
That's a great approach. Another way to stay motivated is to track your progress and celebrate your successes, no matter how small they may seem. Seeing the results of your efforts can be a powerful motivator.
Absolutely. And it's also helpful to remind yourself why you're making these changes. Keeping in mind the positive impact you're creating can help you stay focused and committed.
Yes, and don't forget to share your experiences with others. Talking about your actions and the impact they've had can inspire others to follow suit and create a ripple effect.
Let's discuss some practical ways to apply what we've learned. For instance, you might start a small community project, like a neighborhood cleanup, or participate in local volunteer activities. These actions can help build a sense of community and make a tangible difference.
Another practical application is to set up a personal challenge. For example, commit to performing one act of kindness each day for a month. It could be something simple, like writing a positive note to a friend or helping a colleague with their work.
That's a fantastic idea. And remember, the goal is to make these actions a natural part of your daily routine. Over time, they'll become second nature and will contribute to a larger positive change.
Before we wrap up, let's revisit a story that highlights the power of small actions. Remember the community park we talked about? That transformation began with a few people's dedication to making a difference. Their small efforts led to a significant improvement in their community.
Yes, and it's a reminder that each of us has the power to contribute to positive change. Whether it's through environmental efforts, acts of kindness, or community involvement, every small action counts.
Exactly. So, as we conclude this podcast, we encourage you to think about one small action you can take today. Reflect on how it can contribute to a larger impact and how you can make it a regular part of your life.
Thank you for joining us on this journey to explore the impact of small actions. We hope you found inspiration and practical tips to incorporate into your daily life.
And remember, it's the small, consistent actions that can lead to the biggest changes. Keep making a difference, and we'll see you in our next episode. Thanks for listening.